Thank you. Hannah Arendt has a great essay in her book, Judgment and Responsibility, where she said that those who truly live the moral life don't say, I oughtn't or I shouldn't. They say, I can't. And I think nothing defines the life of my friend Norman Finkelstein better than that moral firmness. Many of you may know what Norman has endured for that courage. While a doctoral student at Princeton, he uncovered the fraud, including fraudulent documents that were used in a 1984 book by Joan Peters called From Time Immemorial. It was a book that was not only widely praised by many Jewish intellectuals, from Barbara Tuchman to Saul Bellow to Marty Peretz, but was used to argue that Palestine was largely unpopulated when Jewish settlers arrived. Finkelstein did the hard academic research to demonstrate that this was untrue. He discredited the legal document central to Peters' thesis, which was used to deny Palestinian rights and their right to the land itself. Noam Chomsky warned him that as a young academic, to take on this battle was career suicide. And Norman, of course, said, I can't. I have no other choice. I can't back down. I have to tell the truth. He embarked on a career that I think at once set him apart. He's certainly, to my mind, one of the greatest scholars on the Middle East, and maybe the finest scholar on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, but also a career that, as he imploded myth after myth, that was sacrosanct to those who justified the occupation, from Israel's political and financial exploitation of the Holocaust to its rewriting of its own history to mask the campaigns of ethnic cleansing and genocide that it carried out to the Palestinians, saw him thrust further and further into the wilderness. Finkelstein's courage and his brilliance and his integrity is juxtaposed against the moral cowardice of the universities that briefly hired him, almost always as a poorly paid adjunct, and then, as soon as they came under pressure, dismissed him, from NYU to Hunter College to DePaul in Chicago. He is a pariah within the academic establishment, not, I believe, finally because he is political, but because he cares. And when you care deeply about the crucified of the earth, you become, in the eyes of the elite and their courtiers in the press and the academy, untouchable. You speak truths no one else will speak. You refuse to compromise because these people cannot compromise. To be reasonable, to be balanced, all code words to dilute the truth. And you do so because you can't do otherwise. Norman has internalized, no doubt, from his parents who were Holocaust survivors, the fundamental lesson of the Holocaust. And that is, as Samuel Johnson said, that the opposite of good is not hate. The opposite of good is indifference. And Norman refuses to be indifferent. He has many qualities that I admire, including his blunt and pointed honesty and his impeccable credentials as a scholar, but I think this deep compassion and empathy is what I admire most. He is an example of what the moral life is, and he has lived it not because it should be lived or it ought to be lived, but because he knew no other way to be. Even when Chomsky, who he and I regard as a moral and intellectual titan, warned him not to take on Peters, and later not to expose Alan Dershowitz as a plagiarist, he answered in those words that Hannah Arendt, I think, correctly pointed out, defines what it means to be a moral being, and that is, I can't. Thank you.
Okay, so you want to put it on? Thank you. Well, thank you so much for inviting me this evening and for all of you to come out this evening. I have a clock in front of me and I have very tight time constraints. It usually takes a professor, or even a former professor, about a half hour to clear his or her throat. But I have to get into a different mode because I have very strict police this evening. And so I'll be watching the clock and trying to stick very closely to the 1 hour time limit that I was granted after many pleas. The topic I'm going to speak on this evening is one which I have not done in the past. For the past 2.5, nearly 3 decades, most of my public speaking as well as my writing has been devoted to a fairly uncomplicated presentation, namely whatever topic happens to be in the news or the broader issue. My modus operandi, if you can use that expression, has been simply to compare the documentary record, the scholarly record on the one side, with how the same events or the same history is depicted in the mainstream media or in the public forum on the other side. And then it's fairly easy to demonstrate that a huge chasm separates what the record shows as compared to how it's typically depicted. But I have decided this year that I think we have to readjust our focus, because there is now a historic opportunity to maybe, possibly, to put the conflict behind us, to remove it from the pages of current events where it's been for decade upon decade, and to finally put it where it belongs, namely in the pages of a history book. There is a possibility, I think. Of course, there's a difference between saying a possibility and a probability, and then there's a difference between saying a probability and a certainty. And I have to be cautious with my words because rumor has it that some people actually attach significance to what I say. So I don't want to exaggerate. But I do think, for many reasons, some of which I'll discuss presently, an opportunity exists. And now our task has to be, I think, to sort of reorient ourselves and to fix our minds, to invest our energies into trying to end the conflict. Because frankly, there is something utterly preposterous, there is something utterly ridiculous about the fact that this conflict goes on and on and on and on, and it never ceases or seems to be coming to an end. If you listen, for example, or read the speech that Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta gave this past week in Israel, the news reports have it that he told the Israelis, "You have to get back to the negotiating table." And the Israelis were appalled by Mr. Panetta's pronouncement. But I thought to myself, what's the point of that? So the negotiations can continue, so-called negotiations, for another year, and another year, and another year, and then pass into another decade, and another decade. Is that called being hard on Israel? I think we have to fix our attention not on resuming the peace process or the non-existent peace process or the pseudo-peace process, but now we have to rivet our attention to achieving peace, a just and lasting peace. And I think there are possibilities now. There have been many developments both in the region, internationally, and domestically in the U.S. that give one rational grounds for hope. Regionally, the most obvious developments are the Arab Spring and the developments that immediately preceded the Arab Spring. Israel's chief ally in the Muslim world historically has been, of course, Turkey, and in recent times, a distance has opened up between Israel and its erstwhile ally. It's not to say that the two countries, Israel and Turkey, are on the collision course, but clearly Turkey, under the leadership of Prime Minister Erdogan, has opened up space between himself and Israel, and as part of the process of trying to command a regional role, he has come to champion, true more in words than in action, but nonetheless, he's come to champion the cause of the Palestinians, and recognizing that championing their cause resonates with the Muslim Arab world. Israel's other chief ally, not in the Muslim world, but the Arab world, for the past 30 years has been Egypt, and there too there has been an alteration of the relationship. Exactly what it will amount to in times to come is still very unclear,